New updates in the Sean Diddy Combs legal saga. The rap mogul gets an official sentencing date. He gets hit with allegations from a shocking new lawsuit. A juror speaks out, and also, apparently, Diddy receives a standing ovation from inmates.
Diddy's world has truly come crashing down. The courtroom was dead silent as the judge announced the final verdict. Then came the moment that sent shockwaves through the entire industry. Diddy broke down in tears. And this time, it wasn't for show.
The verdict in the Sean Diddy Combs trial, but I'll tell you what, this case, not over. No. Important hearing today, sort of. We got to talk about why. Well, Judge Arun Subramanian had sent a tentative October 3rd sentencing date for Diddy on his convictions of 2 counts of transportation to engage in prostitution. Remember, that's what he was convicted of. He was acquitted of racketeering conspiracy, and he was acquitted of the 2 sex trafficking counts, but he was convicted of these prostitution charges. And at one point, there was reporting that defense counsel for Sean Combs and prosecutors, they had then agreed to switch the date to September 22nd. And we thought, okay, because today's hearing was supposed to be about expediting the October hearing. Then they agreed to September 22nd. Now apparently it's back to October 3rd. This is all over the place, very confusing. We'll get it straightened out. I gotta say it's interesting because Combs' defense counsel had originally stated last week, when it was the October 3rd date, that they wanted that sentencing expedited, meaning they wanted it to happen sooner. And one of the things that Sean Combs' attorney, Mark Agnifilo, had said was, quote, the mother of some of his children had passed away many years ago. These kids, the 2 daughters here sitting in the middle of your honor's second row, don't have a parent. Obviously referring to the death of Kim Porter in 2018, mother of Christian, Jesse, Delilah, Quincy. And by the way, remember Sean Combs was denied bail, so it wasn't even like he got to go home after the verdict. But clearly they wanted this expedited. They want his sentencing to happen as quickly as possible. They want him out of jail. They want him out of prison as soon as possible. And also it's interesting because prosecutors, they need time for the pre-sentencing investigation and report. Basically, that's when a probation officer interviews the defendant, looks at the history, the background, childhood, education, employment, criminal history, finances, the mental and physical health of the defendant. There are interviews that are conducted with family and friends. The officer looks at various court and school records, employment records, financial records. The officer could speak to the victims in the case, law enforcement that were involved in the investigation, provide all of this information in a report to the judge. Because here the judge is going to have a lot of discretion when it comes to the sentence. What could a sentence look like? Well, prosecutors indicated in a filing that before even doing a pre-sentencing investigation, Combs is looking at 51 to 63 months, a little over 4 to 5 years in prison. The defense seems to be pushing for 21 to 27 months, so a little over 1.5 to 2 years. But remember, Combs has been sitting in federal lockup since September at the MDC, so if he gets time served, he really wouldn't be spending that much time behind bars. Now, of course, the extremes, when you talk about transportation to engage in prostitution, the maximum for each count is 10 years in prison. You stack them together, you get 20 years. Okay, based upon the facts in this case, seems highly unlikely he would get that much. Other side, you get the idea. There's no minimum for this charge. So could he get time served and walk free? Also seems unlikely, in that you're dealing with multiple instances of transporting Jane and Cassie, the 2 victims in this case, and men across state lines for the purposes of sex work. You could say this is an aggravating factor why I don't think he's just going to get time served.
This was real. This was raw. A man finally forced to face the weight of years filled with accusations, rumors, and relentless behind-the-scenes pressure. The jury's verdict wasn't just surprising, it was explosive. Guilty on multiple serious charges. It confirmed what many had long suspected but were too scared to say out loud. For years, Diddy was followed by whispers about his secretive lifestyle, his tight grip on the music industry, and the power he was said to wield through fear, money, and control. But now, those whispers have turned into a thunderous truth. Prison time is no longer a distant possibility. Inside the courtroom, witnesses say the atmosphere shifted the moment the word guilty was read. Diddy's cool, confident image cracked. His designer suit and carefully polished persona couldn't protect him from the weight of justice. He lowered his head into his hands and cried. And for the first time in decades, Diddy looked completely powerless. The judge didn't hold back. Locking eyes with Diddy, he made it clear this trial was never just about one man.
Right? You got sentencing, civil suits, a lot to get into. So while Combs was acquitted of racketeering conspiracy and the sex trafficking charges that he was facing, he was convicted of transportation to engage in prostitution. Currently, sentencing is set for October 3rd. However, there is a hearing set for July 8th where the defense will be arguing for the sentencing date to be expedited, to happen sooner. Obviously, they want that, considering Combs was also denied bail yet again, despite arguments from his legal counsel after the verdict that he should be released on bond. It didn't happen. They want to make sure this happens as quickly as possible. But what will he be sentenced to, really? That's the question. And also, will the government seize his assets? What about all of those civil lawsuits that he faces? Again, a lot of questions, a lot to get into. So for all of this, let me bring on former sex crimes prosecutor and criminal defense attorney, the great Matt Murphy is with us. Matt, good to see you.
Happy to be here, as always.
Got to ask you your reaction to the verdict. Is it what you expected?
Well, hearkening back to, I don't know, we were talking about this, you and I, a couple of months ago, and I gotta say, whether it's fun to be right or not in a case like this, we were both right. This was never a good fit for RICO for a lot of different reasons, and the consent element regarding the sex trafficking was always problematic. And I thought the prosecution here did a good job presenting their case. They did a good job presenting their theory. But when you match in a trial context, when you match like professorial and kind of plotting, which is the way a lot of government lawyers are, versus dynamic and engaging and that personality of the defense, it's always a mismatch. You're always up against it. And the Mann Act, like we talked about, I thought he was going down on that after like the second day of testimony. The problem is for the prosecution, the Mann Act is a very old law, and it was essentially legislative morality from about 100 years ago, where it was transporting prostitutes across state lines. The intent may have been good. It was essentially a very early version of sex trafficking, but it was really more an attempt to stop prostitution, which is, as we know, never going to happen. So almost every lonely guy in New York City who's going through a divorce, who is having a problem in the dating pool, who has some sex worker drive over from New Jersey, if he buys her Uber or his Uber, theoretically, that's a violation of the Mann Act. So that is it's not the same type of crime. There's no mandatory minimum under federal law. The judge does not have to. That. Right, they don't have to. Now, it carries up to 10 years per event, so he faces up to 20 years. The prosecution, I think, is asking for 46 months or something like that. They're asking for far less than that.
If they had called, let's say, Christina Coram, okay, this chief of staff who had been mentioned, I think, by almost every witness, and she said, hey, listen, there was a criminal enterprise, okay? We were all a part of it. Everybody knew what the job description was. My job was to do this. His job was to do this. You think they would have gotten racketeering? If they didn't include Jane, who was arguably the more problematic testimony, I mean, Sean Combs still paying her rent, messages that she was setting up a lot of these sexual encounters. Cassie had messages too that were problematic that showed, if we're talking about whether she was a willing participant or not, but if you focus just on Cassie and you didn't call in Jane, or you didn't call in a Mia, or you didn't call in a Brianna Bengolan, if you limited the case, and now it's so easy to play, Monday morning quarterback or armchair lawyer here, but do you feel that the prosecution could have won this case if they structured it differently, if they called different witnesses?
That's a great question, and that's something that these prosecutors will literally be wondering for the rest of their lives, for the rest of their careers. They're going to be wondering if they'd done it differently, would the impact.
This was about accountability in an industry that's ignored too much for far too long. Fame is not immunity, the judge stated firmly. Power doesn't equal protection, and wealth can't rewrite justice. His words didn't just linger, they rippled through the entire entertainment world. This wasn't just another trial, it was a turning point, and Diddy felt every bit of it. 50 Cent, who had been vocal throughout the entire saga, wasted no time. Just moments after the verdict, he posted a cryptic yet piercing message. Told y'all, no more games. He didn't need to explain. Everyone knew exactly what he meant. For years, 50 had been warning people, hinting at the dark truths hidden behind Diddy's empire. And now the court had finally validated what he'd been saying all along. The internet lit up immediately. Celebrities, fans, and former insiders began speaking out. Some were stunned, others admitted the red flags had always been there. A few even started sharing stories they had buried for years out of fear. The verdict had cracked the dam. The silence was beginning to shatter. Even more telling was how quickly Diddy's inner circle started to back away. People who once praised him, posted tributes, or built their brands around his name suddenly went quiet, or worse, began scrubbing their profiles clean.
Count two, that obviously being sex trafficking as it relates to Cassie Ventura. And that was only because of the questions that the jury was asking when they were bringing some notes back. And that was kind of in relation to what had happened at specific instances that the government point out were allegations of sex trafficking. So I thought because of the tone that was inside the courtroom, the way the family was getting a little bit emotional sitting inside the gallery, even Diddy's demeanor, for the most part, we've seen him kind of really keep up his spirits. But yesterday was really a time where we kind of saw, I think, the weight weighing in on him, that it's possible a conviction on some of the more serious charges were going to happen. And so when the jury came back not guilty on count 1, 2, and 4, I was a little surprised, especially to count 2, but I do respect the jury's decision. They spent a lot of time listening to this case, listening to all the testimony, listening to all the evidence, and that was the verdict that they had rendered.
Yeah, I wasn't surprised that they found him guilty of transportation to engage in prostitution. We have been saying since for weeks on this show that felt like a straightforward path to conviction. Wasn't surprised not guilty with Jane, given some of the gray areas of her testimony, but also the jury didn't even ask for one readback of her testimony or anything to do with her testimony, so it made me think they might have already been decided there. I was surprised about Cassie Ventura sex trafficking just because, like you said, the readback of that testimony, and then shortly thereafter, they came back yesterday and said, we have a verdict on that charge. So I thought, they're convinced. And when it came to racketeering, I thought they were still going to be hung because they said they were at an impasse yesterday. It seemed like based on their note, there was no way that would change. The judge told them to continue deliberating. They come back today, and like in an hour, they come back not guilty on racketeering. I'm not really sure what that split ultimately will be. Maybe the jurors will speak out and we'll hear. Got to ask you about Diddy's reaction. Okay, so we have courtroom sketches of what it looked like. You were in there. What was his reaction to the verdict?
Oh, he was very pleased with the verdict. Obviously, I think for the defense and the defendant, that being Sean Combs, I think obviously they would have wanted an acquittal on all the charges. But I think given that they weren't a conviction on the more serious charges of RICO conspiracy and sex trafficking as it relates to Cassie in one charge and Jane in another charge, I think overall Combs was very, very pleased with the jury, to the point where I saw him kind of mouth a little thank you to the jurors as they were still sitting kind of in the jury box, as they were kind of leaving for the end of their day. Obviously, we still have some more matters to address for our end. But in terms of just his reaction, even his family's reaction, Jesse, I think they were so happy knowing that there's such a strong possibility that their father will come home. Obviously, if he would have been convicted on the more serious charges, that might have been a different discussion. But given that he was only convicted on count 3 and 5, that being the Mann Act, it seems like, given that it comes with a lesser penalty and sentencing, I think the family is like, yes, our father is coming home, our loved one is coming home, and we hope to see him very, very soon.
And talk about a reaction. Outside that courthouse, my gosh, what has been going on out there? There's verbal disputes, people spraying things. Just give us a brief summary of what you've witnessed outside that courthouse after the verdict.
I witnessed a lot, Jesse. A lot was going on. There was kind of, I will even say, pandemonium after the verdict was read. And outside, a lot of Diddy supporters, a lot of people who are kind of with the Free Diddy, I wouldn't say movement, but I guess, they believed in his innocence. They were very pleased, even thinking that it was a possibility he'd just walk outside of that courthouse at some point. But it was a lot of commotion. I did see some people getting to some heated debates, especially in relation to Cat.
Behind the scenes, sources say the phone call stopped. The support vanished. His once loyal entourage quietly disappeared. Diddy was left completely alone. As the sentencing phase kicked off, the judge didn't hold back. This wouldn't be a symbolic slap on the wrist. It would be real, concrete, a punishment measured in years, not months. No special treatment, no celebrity loopholes. Diddy's legal team begged for leniency, citing his charitable work, his influence on culture, and his legacy in hip-hop. But the prosecution stood firm. They didn't describe a single mistake. They painted a picture of a long-running pattern, a lifestyle rooted in secrecy, exploitation, and fear. And the judge agreed. That's when Diddy finally crumbled. No longer the mogul, not the party king, the tastemaker, or the hitmaker, just a man facing judgment, an inmate in waiting. Outside the courthouse, cameras captured every moment. Protesters demanding justice raised their signs. Supporters showed up too, but even they looked shaken. It was like watching a legend fall from the sky, a myth shattered in real time. This verdict doesn't just end a chapter, it signals something bigger. A cultural shift, a loud wake-up call to every so-called untouchable who thought their fame would shield them. That era, it's over, and Diddy's tear-streaked face has become the symbol of that reckoning. As 50 Cent continues to speak out and more names emerge in the widening investigations, one thing is clear: this is just the beginning. More stories, more survivors, more truth surfacing. For too long, the entertainment world thrived on illusion, on keeping the curtain tightly shut around what happened in the shadows. But now, that curtain is gone. The truth is pouring in, and no amount of PR spin can reverse what the judge declared: prison time. Diddy, once a towering figure in music, is now a convicted felon staring down years behind bars. And the industry he once dominated, it's already shifting. The fallout has started. Endorsements withdrawn, projects canceled.
Tell me if it was unique. $50 million, right?
Yes.
You know, the idea of private security. It was an
Yes.
interesting argument because who would monitor him. It was interesting because the prosecution at one point had said it's not fair, right? He's a wealthy celebrity who's providing a bail package that other people in his similar position wouldn't be able to provide. Now, the defense was like, well, the only reason we're presenting a package like this is because of what he's accused of and his wealth and his resources. We have to address that in a certain way. The reason it's so extensive is because of his wealth and resources. That bail package that was put forward was rejected by the court. What did you make of that?
Well, at that time, the judge was looking at the RICO Act and sex trafficking. So, Puffy was looking at possibly 25 years, or more, depending on what the guidelines were based on if he was convicted. So at 55 years old, at that time, it's almost a life sentence. So, and he has a lot of wealth and he had a private plane. So the judge was looking at that. Plus, in the federal system, they look at danger to the community. Where in the state system, they're not allowed to look at that. They look at risk of flight. So I think with all the letters behind that were coming in that we were not really privy to from a lot of the alleged victims, I think the judge made a decision in that, hey, this is not going to be sufficient enough. I thought that at the end, he kind of, when we brought it on our private security team and we showed him who was going to be doing it, we did Sam Bankman-Fried. So we knew that, we would be completely covered on that end. And we gave him the idea of there would be no Wi-Fi in the building that we were looking at, and that he would not be able to really be able to connect with anybody but his legal team and his family. We thought at that point that maybe we had a chance, but at the end, the judge denied it, and that's where we stood. And now on this case coming forward, after the convictions, after he wasn't convicted, at the end, we didn't know what he was going to do. So, when Mark reached out to me afterwards, we started thinking about putting another bail package together.
And what is that bail package and by the way, is this a bail package that you think could be submitted again even after the judge just denied bail?
Well, the judge denied bail based on the statute, and the statute stated a certain amount of information that part of the Mann Act that, was not eligible for bail. There are certain circumstances that can be done. We're going to regroup again. I know that they were going to go talk to Mr. Combs again and see what happens there. They have the October 3rd date. And, I don't know where he stood. As of the other day, he wanted to get out. I don't think anybody wants to be at MDC where he is. So, we're going to reconvene and see what happens, at a later date. We could go back with another package.
Would that would it require him to stay in New York? Would it be him to be? I know he wanted to go back to his property in Miami, Florida.
Labels are now reassessing their relationships. Major streaming platforms have quietly started shifting their approach, removing Diddy from featured spots, tweaking playlists, and bracing for potential legal fallout. This isn't just a fall from grace, it's a full-blown collapse. No matter how deep his pockets run or how high his name once soared, the downfall is both undeniable and irreversible. As 50 Cent bluntly said, the game's over. But the story doesn't stop here. What's unraveling isn't just Diddy's future, it's the breakdown of an entire system. The handlers, the agents, the protectors, the ones who turned a blind eye, the ones who knew and said nothing. Now, they're being dragged into the light. Some of the very names once proudly tied to Diddy's legacy are now scrambling to cut ties. Contracts are getting shredded. PR firms are walking away. Artists who once praised him as a mentor are suddenly quiet, scared of the fallout by association. Behind the scenes, panic is setting in. People who thought they were safe because they weren't the face of the empire are realizing they played a role in keeping it all running. Now they're asking themselves, how long before my phone rings? How long until a subpoena lands at my door? And more unsettling still, some insiders have begun to speak. Whistleblowers, anonymous sources, former staffers. What they're revealing goes beyond scandal. It exposes a system. Reports describe lavish properties rigged with hidden cameras, exclusive parties where phones were confiscated, guests monitored closely, some moving freely, others tightly watched. All of it crafted for one thing: control. Psychological, financial, emotional. But with the court's decision now final, that control is fading fast. Diddy's name, once a symbol of luxury, hustle, and dominance, is now a cautionary tale, a stark reminder of what happens when unchecked power meets long-delayed justice. And more than that, it's a wake-up call, because if this can happen to someone as wealthy, protected, and powerful as Diddy,
happening before October 3rd. If both sides agree, great. If they don't, what is a compelling legal argument for the defense to say, we want this sentencing to happen much sooner?
Well, I mean, we know that behind the scenes, what they want, of course, is they expect a chance that he's going to be released. So that's their big motivating factor, of course. Whether the court abides by that, I mean, it is a substantial change in circumstance. He was acquitted of all of these serious charges, right?
But he was just denied bail. He was denied bail again.
He was denied bail again, and I actually learned that on your segment yesterday afternoon as I was sort of doing my preparation for this. But we have to remember that one of the things that he got in trouble for, that Diddy got in trouble for in jail, was using other inmates' calling number. Remember that? So he was calling witnesses in the case from jail using other inmates. That was a direct affront to that judge. That was remember, we had all those attempts at bail that were denied at the very beginning of the case, one after another. This judge, and it's the same judge who's going to sentence him, denied that over and over again. And you and I, again, in another conversation we had on your show, we both said he is screwed now, that he's got no chance because he's violating the rules of the court while in jail. So if he's disobeying the rules of the jail and the directive of the court while he's in custody, how can he be expected to actually follow the terms of a bail agreement when he's out of custody?
Right.
And I think that chicken is coming home to roost again. I mean, I think that's what happened yesterday afternoon. That any judge who has a criminal defendant who behaves like that is an affront to the court itself. It's disrespectful to the court. Sure. And it's almost like he couldn't get out of his own way there at the beginning. But he had an excellent defense team.
He does. So assuming for a moment, whenever the sentencing hearing happens, right? Let's say it happens in a month from now. Let's say it has October 3rd. The question is, what's his sentence? As we mentioned, the prosecution in a filing from yesterday talked about the guidelines range being 51 to 63 months. Now, this is before a pre-sentencing investigation and report. Now, the defense, right, they want 21 months. He's already served almost 10. Talk to us about what you're thinking here, because there is no minimum. The maximum's 10. If the judge were to combine it together, like you said, 20 years, feels highly unlikely that would happen. As we're talking, what is a pre-sentencing report investigation? How would it affect this? What do you think the judge is going to do? There's so many different factors to consider here, and it's not like a murder case when it's like, okay, we know what's going to happen. It's like life in prison without the possibility of parole. It's a given. There's room here. What do you think the judge is going to do?
So in federal court, this is actually very interesting. They rely very heavily on those pre-sentencing investigations. So essentially what will happen is there'll be a federal probation officer, and they do these for almost every case, where they will do their own investigation, where they'll talk to family members, they'll talk to employers, they'll talk to neighbors, and they will make a recommendation to the court as to suitability for release, suitability for time. And that's something that
It can happen to anyone. No one is beyond reach now. You can feel the tension tightening its grip on the industry. Conversations are shifting behind closed doors. Events are being quietly canceled. Projects suddenly shelved. Media outlets that once turned a blind eye are now racing to investigate, desperate to stay ahead of a story they once ignored. And for the victims, both those who've spoken and those still suffering in silence, there's a shift in the air, a sense of being seen, a spark of hope that maybe, just maybe, they'll finally be heard, that their stories will matter. 50 Cent isn't letting up either. He's already hinted that this is far from over. In his words, this was just step one. The rest, y'all ain't ready. Love him or hate him, one thing is clear. 50's voice is reshaping the conversation. He's not just throwing shade online, he's forcing the culture to face the truths it's ignored for too long. Because this moment isn't just about one man's sentencing. It's about justice. It's about truth. It's about breaking a toxic cycle. Diddy's breakdown in court wasn't just personal. It was symbolic. A mask slipping, an illusion crumbling. And even though the courtroom is now quiet and the cameras have moved on, the shockwaves of that verdict and those tears are still rippling through the entertainment world, through halls of power, through the lives of those he impacted. The legacy Diddy leaves behind won't be the one he envisioned. Not the awards, not the chart-topping hits, but a cautionary tale. Because when an empire is built on fear and silence, it's only a matter of time before truth tears it down. Now, with prison on the horizon, the man who once made people cry tears of joy at glitzy parties is left crying alone. Because the game has changed, and now, not even Diddy is untouchable.